And welcome back to Podcasters Row. This is King of Podcasts. Thank you for listening to the show and finding the show as you always do. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, if you haven't had a chance to do so, this is only the second episode, but I'll ask for it right now. Please go ahead and feel free to rate and review. If you catch this show on YouTube, please be sure to go ahead and like, share, and subscribe. We'd love to go ahead and hear from you and put that all together. So I'm glad we're doing this show together again. Getting the chance to talk to other podcasters like myself. It's just nice to know. And when I look at the next guests and I see what they've been doing, they've been talking to some pretty good guests. We're looking right now, 4 seasons they've been on this, and no shortage of who they've talked to that are pretty big deals. Best-selling authors, New York Times best-selling authors. Talking to the CEO of Big Cat Rescue, Carol Baskin. Remember Tiger King? Forget about that. Among other things, really. I'm actually very impressed with the guest lineup and what they do to go ahead and put the show together. But let me go introduce our guest. So he is the founder and CEO of Krish Media and Marketing, a full-service e-commerce, technology development, online and digital media marketing agency and solutions provider. Best-selling author of 50 Shades of Marketing, Whip Your Business into Shape and Dominate Your Competition. And also a book I'm really interested in, I need to go and get my hands on, is Podcastnomics, the book of podcasting to make you millions. I'm here with Naresh Vissa. Naresh, thanks for being on.
It's a pleasure to be on. Looking forward to the interview.
And there's more books you got in here. The New PR, 21st Century Public Relations Strategies and Resources. Yep. The Trump book, How Digital Liberals Silence a Nation to Making America Hate Again. And the new book, Nobody the Best-Selling Author, How to Write, Publish, and Market Your Book. We're not going to get any politics in here. But what we'll say is there's a lot you've done here in the investment space. And the show that you actually host right now in podcasting is the Work From Home show. And with that program, there's a lot you put into this and pretty comprehensive. You and your co-host, Adam, also coming on, helping people discover how you can efficiently and effectively work from home on your own schedule while producing the best results. So let me ask you this first, Naresh, about there's a lot of talk now where remote work has become very popular because of the pandemic. And now there's this whole thought process where people don't want to lose that opportunity to continue to work from home and continue to have their living without having to deal with the commute, the extra expenses ongoing. You and Adam Schroeder have been talking about this. You've already been working from home for over a decade yourselves. And then this opportunity obviously came here where more people want to live this lifestyle. So right off the bat, what would you say to those that they might start feeling the pressure that remote work might not stay for them, working from home might not be the possibility, that their employers might be telling them they got to go back to the office? What do you say to that?
Well, first off, thanks again for having me on the show. A couple of things. Number one is we started our podcast, a work from home show, in March 2020. And if you remember what happened in March 2020, that's when people were shut down, locked down, and where they were forced, many of, not all of them, but many of them, and definitely a majority of them, to work from home if they could. So we've been doing this podcast for 3.5 years now.
Yeah.
We've been at it for quite a bit. We've interviewed the best of the best experts in business topics like investing, marketing, supply chain, etc., self-help, health and wellness, a little bit of politics. And so to go back to your question, you're a worker, you've been working from home, your employer tells you, hey, it's time to come back into the office. Well, the first thing is, where were you in 2021 when everybody was quitting their jobs, leaving their jobs, whether it was because they were getting more money somewhere else or because their employer said, hey, you have to come back into the office after getting this vaccine, you got to come back in. The Great Resignation was in 2021. So that was the perfect time to leave. Perfect time. If you're somebody who did not leave, and I left several clients to go to pick up competitor clients. My wife left her job to go somewhere better. Pretty much my brother did the same thing. Most family members did the same thing. Cousins, I'd say half my friends left to pursue better frontiers. What you should be doing right now, if you don't want to go back into the office, is you need to start looking for other jobs. And it's a pretty tight job market. And the fact of the matter is, working from home, it's heavy technology, if you want to call it information type of jobs, information studies, technology, IT, internet. I mean, just think tech when you think of working from home. So if you work in that field, you should absolutely try to find another job where you can work from home. If you don't work in a field where, if you do work in a field where you have to go into a physical location, well, maybe it's time to start reading maybe my book, 50 Shades of Marketing, or other books out there, and to develop other skill sets so that you can transition from your current job into more of a management role from home,
Right.
or a tech role from home at that same company, or try to start your own business on the side. That's how I got started. I started a business on the side while working full time. I had to go into an office 4 days a week. And then I started my bit where my business was on the side. And by the time I left, 2 months after I left, I was making about 20% more than what I was making at my full-time job after tax.
I want to ask you now, in the process, let's go and talk about the podcast itself, work from home,
Yep.
because you're regularly getting some pretty significant people that make a lot of TV appearances. Let's just say on a lot of news programs. And they're not, I wouldn't imagine it'd be that very easy to go ahead and come by. But you're doing your own work where you have that understanding of PR, working, with your own agency to go ahead and work on various issues, you know, digital media marketing. Talk to me about how you're able to go ahead and leverage what you're doing at Chris Media, and how you've been able to go ahead and get the kind of guests that you've been able to get regularly, authors, people that are pretty high profile on on the podcast regularly.
Well, my favorite part of hosting the work from home show is the amazing people who I meet through the podcast. These are people who, like you said, are number one New York Times bestselling authors, CEOs of well-known companies, politicians, who are well-known in the political space, campaign advisors, etc. And they want to come on our show. These are people who are reaching out to us saying, hey, we've heard some episodes. A guest referred us over to your show, a previous guest who's a friend of ours, or they want to come on our show. So when we first got started in March 2020, we had to do the outreach and get relevant work from home experts on our show. And that's why
Right.
season one was so heavy on working from home, the equipment you need, health and wellness, work from home apps, mindset,
Right.
just so much work from home stuff. And we did extremely well during that first season, so that when we got into the second season in 2021, we had experts reaching out to us saying, hey, can we come on your show? So that's a big chunk of it. It's experts reaching out to us saying, can we come on your show? We have a book to promote. Publicists, that's a huge one. We get publicists every day reaching out to us saying, my client has come out with this book or this podcast, or wants to come on your show. Will you interview them? So we're in season 4 right now.
Right.
We've renewed the show for season 5 and a season 6. Not sure about a season 7 yet. We will see about that. If we do a season, it's probably going
What
to be a
is it about
shorter
the guests that you bring on? If you have a lot of people that are coming in to go ahead and bring in people to come onto the show, they get the word of mouth. They say, well, we love what you're doing. We want to bring this person on. How much of a filter do you have as to who gets to come on and who doesn't?
Oh, huge filter. Huge filter. We get about 100 pitches a month.
Right.
And our show is once a week. It's a weekly show.
Right.
So that means only 4 make it to the show. So that's 1 out of 25 will make it to the show. How do we screen for criteria? It's a mix. It's, have I heard of this person? Have I read their book previously? Because if I've heard of the person or read a book of theirs previously, then it's like, okay, they're a pretty big name. It's also, if I haven't heard of a person, it's okay, let's look them up. Let's see their Amazon page. All right. I just interviewed somebody or two co-authors. Number one, multiple. They actually have written 32 New York Times bestsellers. 32, which is that's unheard of. Most well-known authors will be lucky to write three or four. And they came on my show, and I looked up. I'd never heard of them. Their publicist reached out, and their books all have more than 5,000. Not all, but they have at least 10 books between them that have more than 5,000 reviews on Amazon.
Wow.
Just getting 50 reviews on Amazon is pretty difficult.
Yes.
So that's a screening criteria. It's, oh wow, they got all these 1,000+ reviews on Amazon, or maybe they host their own podcast that does extremely well. We've had other podcasters come on our show, and they have more than 1,000 reviews on Apple Podcasts, or maybe more than 1,000 ratings on Apple Podcasts. So a lot just depends on who they are, what they do. There are some guests who operate in niche fields. For example, we've had 2 guests on throughout our history who are experts in carbon emissions and they're experts in, if you want to call it, climate change and carbon emissions. But how does that tie to our show, working from home? Because if you remember, when people started working from home, there was a lot of media about, oh, look how clear the skies are, look how great our environment is.
Mm-hmm.
So we brought on 2 experts, scientists, to talk about, is this for real? Is it actually better for the environment? Should there be more of a political movement to encourage companies and their workers to work from home for the sake of the environment? And they are like 2 of the foremost experts. So that's an example of, maybe they may not have the clout, but they have the expertise that fits our topic, because that's such a niche topic that we don't cover. Like I said, 2 episodes over the last 4 years or so, 3.5 years. Another example of a niche topic is ChatGPT. That's a brand new technology, brand new. There's only a handful of experts on it. And I brought on a friend of mine who happens to be one of those experts, probably one of the top 5 experts in this country on ChatGPT as it relates to HR and recruiting. And so he came on, we did about a 40-minute episode on how to use ChatGPT, what it is, how anyone can use it from home to help them do their job. He's just a regular person. I mean, he's an employee at a company, but he's an expert in ChatGPT. He wrote a best-selling book on it and brought him on the show. So it really depends on the brand name, the clout, the online clout, and the topic.
So let me go and bring to this point a couple of things unpack. Number one, the fact of how AI is such an important thing now. If you were watching what the strike is going on in Hollywood with the actors and the writers, and how much of importance of a disruptor like AI can be, like a ChatGPT is becoming now as a disruptor in the space. It's one of the forerunners of a disruption now in this space, but of course there'll be others that will come in after that and probably take its spot, because that's always how it works. The pioneers come in and usually get kind of pushed aside by somebody else that does it bigger and better, taking the model and just working off from it. I want to ask now also about, in the listing of guests that you have on, listen, I don't judge and I don't say anything about this. Like I said, all my programming I keep apolitical. And if I see other podcasters out there, I probably would be, depending on the space, but like you said, you would do a work from home program, but sometimes some of your content, you'll find a way that there's a relatability to it. But one of the other things that I noticed is that there are quite a lot of political figures that, when they're seeing other programming, they might be very polarizing. That might isolate some of the audience that might tune in. I can understand it happens. What do you say about that part when you determine who comes on, and knowing that it will be someone that comes on that just by name alone will say, oh, who is this? And why am I going to listen to this? Why should I? Because their political beliefs are going to, which I hate anyway, the thought that, politics has to be involved with everything that goes on with our content. But what do you say about that part? And does that become a deterrent? And what makes you feel like, okay, we're going to bring somebody on, even though we might get some blowback for it?
Great question. And it's something that we talked about early on. And our answer to that question has evolved as life has gone on, as the pandemic. Look, our show was a result of the pandemic, and the fact of the matter is the pandemic was politics. Whether you
Oh yeah.
agree with it or not, it was completely run by politics. Whether it was getting the vaccine or being locked down at home, it was politics that was making these decisions. And so without the pandemic, there is no work from home show. With that
Right.
being said, our first season, we had about 125 or so episodes. Of those 125 episodes, only maybe three of them were political in nature. One was a special election episode of 2020, and the other two touched on issues. One of them was about the concept of a universal basic income and I
Right.
mean economic issues, and another one was about a concept of a jobs guarantee. Look, like you said, you can tie anything back to politics. Now, artificial intelligence is becoming a political
Oh
issue
yeah.
because, again, the fact of the matter is artificial intelligence is going to replace is going to destroy a ton of jobs. But my view is that it's also going to create even more jobs down the line. And so it's important
Yeah.
that we talk about these issues specifically. You bring up, I mean, you've gone through some of our guests. Yes, recently, there are several folks who are political in nature. People like Carrie Lake. So again, if you follow politics or anything, then you know
Well, I saw Janine
Carrie Lake.
Pirro and Frank Gaffney there. Like, I know
There
what
you go.
shows I would normally see that I know that would be appearing on, but then it's because of the association. There's going to be a bit of there will be some criticism or just some commentary that you might be getting that you might have to whittle around.
Yeah, yeah. So I was gonna. It's good that you bring up. So I actually want to share some of these names and topics. It's not just names, but it's topics too. So Carrie Lake. I mean, these are big people would, of course, not all people on the left would probably disagree, but a lot of up and coming podcasters would be like, "How did you get this person on? Like what did you do to get them on?" Carrie Lake ran for Arizona Republican nominee governor. She was on the show. We did an episode on Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
Right.
Look, we're in the middle of an election season. Next year is going to be the prime of it. Right now is just the beginning of it. And so when big name folks want to come on the show, want to talk about issues that were issues during the pandemic or have to do with issues as far as the economy or working from home goes, we bring them on. And that's why we also brought on Dr. Robert Malone, who was one of the inventors of the mRNA technology
Right.
way back in the 1980s. So we brought him on because these are questions, these are issues that people, they may not trust the mainstream news media. And they could be working from home and they're shut off from colleagues to have water cooler talk with or whatnot. They're shut off. And so they come to us for this advice, this information. Has it turned off some folks? It has. We've gotten some negative blowback. Has it brought on new folks? Absolutely. And I know your show is about podcasting from a podcast marketing perspective.
Right.
Getting on somebody like Judge Janine Pirro, like Robert F. Kennedy's biographer, getting people on like this, like Congressman Dennis Kucinich,
Right.
who ran for president in 2008 as a Democrat. We don't discriminate against anybody. They offer a lot. They have a lot of wisdom, and I've learned a lot, or listeners have learned a lot. And like I said, going back to the marketing side of it,
Right.
these people have huge names. And so this helps with the Google SEO. It helps with the stature of the show. It's like, oh, wow, you know. Now, I will admit, we're not a right-wing podcast. We're not a left-wing. We're not trying to compete with Ben Shapiro or anything. We're about working from home. We are mostly a business podcast with maybe 5% politics thrown in there. So, because we're not this huge political Fox News or CNN or Ben Shapiro or Buck Sexton and Clay Travis, there isn't a whole lot of blowback because we're a medium-sized podcast and we have our core following and we come out with a lot of great information that has helped thousands of people worldwide work from home, negotiate better from home, use technology to their advantage, etc.
Let me ask you a couple of questions just based on all this. when it comes to the format of the show. So one of the guests I talked to over on Cannabis Radio, we talked to Dr. Judy Mikovits. You remember the pandemic? You want to talk about
I remember her very well.
I'll tell you what. Listen, it wasn't the plan for me to go ahead and have her on Blunt Business, but you know what? We had the opportunity. I was like, I was going to have her on on a different show, but like it just worked out. I just like, all right, I'll talk to her, and I did an hour-long episode with her. But one of the things I made sure of was that I couldn't go ahead and just not talk about the criticism that she got. But the way I did it was I took one question. It's like the Matt Lauer style, right? You wait about half an hour into the interview, and there's a point. Okay, we got to talk about the elephant in the room. There are these, but I didn't want to go and give a gotcha question. That's not what all these journalists want to do now. That's not what I want to do. But what I did was I took quotes from 3 different sources that really went ahead and went after. And like, look, somebody said this person said this person said this. What do you say to these arguments? And I let her talk. But my point was, I wouldn't have been right if I wasn't fair and impartial and say, listen, we have to talk about the stuff that is going to be critical. How would you say you've been handling that when it comes to, like, say, like a Carrie Lake, because, or a Janine Pirro, some of the things that might be asked? Is that something where you're willing to go ahead and go up to the fence and say, look, we got to talk about this too?
Well, first off, with Janine Pirro, I'll say this. With a lot of these people, they only have about 15 minutes maximum. And it's likely that they're like in a car ride calling you up on Zoom to do the interview. And so they're going to be background distractions and they got to run. If they're even 2 minutes late or if you were 2 minutes late to the interview,
right.
They'll say, let's just reschedule because I don't have much time. They're constantly on the run. These are like celebrities. So it's hard to get in those tough questions with them because they're actually coming in. They're usually on media tours promoting a book. Okay. And they're actually coming in. They're actually coming in and just monologuing the entire interview. You do the intro and then you say, thank you for thanks for coming on the show. And they just take it from there and they talk for the next 15 minutes and say, all right, I got to go to the next one. Bye. That's how a lot of them operate. And they're coached to do that. That's intentional. It's not, they don't have the time to sit down and really have a true, real conversation. Now, we did have true, real conversation. That's where it's the job of the podcaster to jump in and say, whoa, 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 whoa. And I did that with Janine Pirro, for example.
Right.
I said, can you clarify this? Can you clarify that? I think one of the best interviews we did was with Donald Trump, one of Donald Trump's top aides, or President Trump's top aides, Peter Navarro.
Right.
He was responsible for
the trade policy,
distributing. He did a bunch of the trade policy during the first 3 years of the administration. He was one of 3 people to stay throughout all 4 years. But during the pandemic year, he was responsible for the actual manufacturing and distribution of the vaccines and face masks and PPE and all that stuff to regular citizens, as well as first responders, healthcare workers, etc. We got him on the show because he wrote a book saying that the election was a fraud. And his publicist reached out to us saying, hey, he's available. And I said, hey, it's Peter Navarro. We got to bring him on. And this is not going to be a work from home topic. This is going to be one of those 5% of our content where it's a gift to have this guy on. His book was hitting the top of the Wall Street Journal bestseller list, Washington Post list.
Yep.
And so anyway, he came on the show, and even though our listeners know politically where I stand and where my co-host stands, but we were both aligned in the sense of, even though I voted for Peter Navarro's political party, I challenged him and I said, show me the proof, man. Show me the proof. And he wasn't able to show the proof. He kept beating around the bush. He wasn't able to show the proof. And I just kept saying, you got to show the proof, like that's not a good enough answer for me. And I challenged him. And at the end of the interview, he actually told both of us, he said, I like this interview a lot because I've been going on all these other shows that voted the same political party as me, and nobody's challenging me. And you guys ask really thoughtful, good, challenging questions that makes me rethink some of my assumptions.
Now, there's quite a few podcasters that will delve financial entrepreneur space. that they don't want to put themselves in any particular political caveat. But the thing is, you can't help. There's some political unguent that's going to be poured onto it. When I think of Patrick Bet David or Chamath, how do I say his name? Palihapitiya, right? Or, you think about, there's Robert Kiyosaki, right? All these types that, in some cases you would think the financial types might be a little more conservative than they are, but they're also very open to various, it's like, what's the best answers, the best solutions. So you can't be judged on the fact that, okay, this person might be of a political mind or a political slant. It doesn't matter. Like, let's just keep the door open for good conversations, whichever side it comes from. And that's the part I also want to look at as well. That I feel like, is that when you look at the other podcasters that are out there before you came on in 2020, were those the kind of types of names or others similar that were basically financial or entrepreneurial minded that came in and said, you know what, that's kind of the style that we like to do as well?
So first off, Chamath is not a good example. I don't think anyone who came from that PayPal mafia or is a billionaire that's not your standard podcaster. Your standard podcaster is a mom and pop company or your mom and pop guy. Even Robert Kiyosaki, he started out mom and pop. He's not shy. He's definitely on the right. He's buy gold, buy real estate.
Right.
And so I do want to say this about our general philosophy at the Work From Home show. The word work is in there. This is not be unemployed at home. This is work from home. We help you invest. We help you start businesses. We help you attain financial freedom. And our belief is that you are responsible for that. We bring on self-help experts. We've had on Tony Robbins' son, J. Rick Robbins, many self-help experts from the Covey, Franklin Covey Institute. Stephen Covey wrote The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. We've had a lot of self-help people, and all of the self-help people will say the same thing, and it aligns with one political philosophy. They'll all say the same thing, which is, you are the individual. You are responsible for your future. Your ancestors, your race, your ethnicity, your gender, all of those are distractions, because you should focus on yourself. Because if you work hard, if you get educated, if you improve yourself, if you make the right connections, you will succeed in this country. And that's what our philosophy is. And we are living proofs of that. I'm a living proof of that. Many other people are living. I mean, really, a majority of the people in this country who consider themselves to be successful are living proofs of that. And so that simple philosophy of get educated, your duty. Most of our listeners have families at home, so you have a duty to take care of your families, your children. Hard work, dedication, all these things are aligned with one political philosophy, really. And that's not by choice. We didn't say, hey, this is what our political philosophy is, or we want to tailor our show. This is just, these are basic tenets to succeeding in business and in life.
Right. I want to ask another thing about Podcastnomics, the book that you put up, but that was back in 2014 you published that book. I would imagine that you could probably put out a second edition now with a lot of new things you've learned, not just from the side of the benefits of what podcasting you can do even as a work from home idea and monetize it. But the other part is that you've been doing this yourself. You've been on the ground. I mean, for all the podcast work I've done, one thing was my independent podcasting I did in 2012 because I wanted to experiment. I wanted to explore where I could take the format. I mean, I'm from a radio format originally and taking it forward. If you had to add more things to that book now, what are maybe one or two things you would absolutely incorporate if you did a second edition that you've learned from your experience doing this podcast?
Well, when that book came out in 2014, that was a breakthrough book because no book about podcasting had been written so thoroughly. That was huge. It sold extremely well. It came out during an inflection point when the podcast Serial came out, hit Apple Podcasts. And that was the first time that people had even heard of a podcast or listened to a podcast. And my book, complete coincidence, came out literally the same month that podcast Serial came out. So it sold extremely well. from 2014 through 2020 or so. Sales have obviously tapered off. What are two things that I would add now? Well, the first thing is the space has grown tremendously. Back then, it was just Apple Podcasts, and there were two people running that entire Apple Podcasts store, if you want to call it. What's happened since then is Apple has expanded that podcasting center. Spotify has gotten into the game. You have iHeartRadio, who's gotten into the game. You have TuneIn, Stitcher. Now Amazon has gotten in. You have the big players who have gotten in the game, and they're putting billions upon billions, if not tens of billions of dollars behind the whole podcasting industry. So the first thing is I would update the technology that I talk about in the book. You have a platform like Anchor, which is now owned by Spotify, I believe.
Or now Spotify for podcasters. Now they renamed. Yeah.
Yep. Spotify for podcasts. So Anchor wasn't around back then. I have an entire chapter on how to start a podcast, how to record, and paying people to edit it, and getting bumper music and all that. With Anchor, you can literally do it all yourself on your phone.
Oh,
for
yeah.
free.
Oh, yeah. No, these days, I'll tell you, the process now compared to when I first started doing my own podcast, it's so simplified now. I mean, I've tried to make it so much more simplified and easy for myself. But my whole thing is just, it's been the part of, well, in 2014, we still had, so many years of first social media, but, I'll ask you this too. The one thing for me, the content's the easy part for me. But it's the marketing, and it's getting that out there for more people to go ahead and catch listeners. I decided to do this model, this show, as a cross-promotional tool, no doubt about it. But I also need to know where, do I need to go and spend the money on, repurposing it as video or putting it out as TikTok or Instagram videos or for trends or whatever other new social media platforms come across, the pipe. Where do I need to get my content in front of to get more people just to listen to the initial podcast? Let me ask you about that, because that's obviously changed since the routes where you can promote without spending money on traffic that might not be good because you might get it from, some other outsourced country and it might just be fake.
Well, the first thing is what I said, having big name guests on your show, that's a big deal because they do a ton of the marketing for you. When Carol Baskin blasts out her appearance on the Work From Home show to her YouTube followers, tens of thousands of people, if not hundreds of thousands of people worldwide, that's a big deal.
Yeah.
That's a huge deal for us. So the guests, absolutely, they're a big deal. They're absolutely a big deal. So that's number one. Number two is the website. You want to have a website where you can actually capture traffic, because when you can capture traffic, you can reach out to them. You can email them. You can tell them, hey, follow us on social media. Of course, social media is another thing where you want to be active. We are active on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and we engage with our guests there. We tag them, letting them know, hey, your episode is published. Please publish it to your file. And they will do that. So there's just, in my book, Podcastnomics, there's an entire chapter on marketing the podcast, driving traffic up. We've run contests. We've sent people free stuff if they would leave us reviews on iTunes or whatever podcasting platform they use. So that's a big deal. Releasing frequent content. You can't be one of those podcasts that just randomly publishes once every few months. You want to be consistent. Every Tuesday, get something out there. Twice a week, get something out there. So these are just some tips to grow the audience, but there's a lot more that people can do, and I recommend that they check out my book, Podcastnomics, for more.
And I'll tell you, I worked on so much to try to get just my content across. And I did guests for quite a bit of while, and that was from a media podcast, but it wasn't anybody who was large guests. It just happened to be just who came in that I was able to go and get onto the show just to get a different perspective of different people behind the scenes in media when it came to either movies, music, TV, or radio. And then I stopped that and changed the format to be more of a commentary. And all my commentary is basically a monologue with information just being backed up, and it's all very current for the most part, with a little bit of timeless content. But I do that, and I say to myself, man, it's the platform? Is it where I'm putting my platform out there to go? Obviously, you got to put more video out there these days. Everybody's making the recommendation because it's kind of the gateway to get in, or that's just where YouTube is a real place to go find podcasts as well, because YouTube is trying to do that as well. So like, it's just a lot to me where I haven't figured out the secret sauce, the best way to go and get my content out there to get more people to notice it. And, maybe also because of the fact that the subjects I talk about might be a little bit too nuanced for people because it's too specific.
It's all of it. Everything that I said, you got to do all of it. Eventually, one of those things will stand out from the rest, but you've got to do all of it.
And I've experimented all. Like I've tried to go, let's go and do 3 episodes a week on one particular show. And just taking, one of my shows was when I'm not podcasting, and it was various topics. 3 a month, or 3 a week I did. So I was doing 12 shows of that, maybe 10, 15 minutes at the most. But, some would hit, some wouldn't. And then I would help me, okay, I need to go ahead and make this show more about this. So like my When I'm Not Podcasting series, I changed it to Brave and the Botchers because I talked about more salacious topics, sex, culture, dating. And I said, okay, that's a standalone show. That's what people want to hear about more. So like I changed the show, taking the format of what I had. Okay, does it work longer or shorter? Do I take a half an hour format? And then I figured it out from there. But it's like, I'm always trying to work on what to do to retain more of an audience and to make it so that my thing with guests, if I put on a guest, am I only going to get the traction of that one guest? Is that going to be enough to go and continue to people to go and have them listen to the program because I'm hosting it and the content that's on to keep them to subscribe, or either subscribe or follow, or, subscribe to the show itself and know, okay, you're always going to get something interesting on the show. You want to be able to have it locked in, keep that RSS feed on you so you can catch new episodes. What is it about that part where people might ask that question? If you're guest intensive, are people only going to come for the guests? Like Joe Rogan, sometimes there might be guests might not want to hear of his that I'll just skip.
We have an entire chapter in my book about this. There are different formats you can do. You can have the guest episode, you can have the banter episode, you can do a mix of both of them. It really just depends. In our case, we had so many guests coming to us and we needed more content. So we shifted to the guest format and we sprinkle in some banter episodes here and there once in a while. If you want to call it monologue episodes or back and forth episodes with my co-host and me. So it really depends. Our monologue episodes actually do better than the guest episodes generally,
right?
Unless we have on a huge name. When we have the big names, those do better. So you just want to keep it fresh. Like I said, there's only so much you can talk about when it comes to working from home. So season 1 was when we had a ton of monologue episodes. And right. Once all that content was done, now we actually only have 2 monologue episodes a year. The first one and the last one. So it's like a kickoff episode and a end of the year episode. And then everything in between is a guest episode.
Right. Fascinating. So, Naresh, there's a lot you're working on right now. You have a current book, From Nobody to Best-Selling Author, How to Write, Publish, and Market Your Book. Talk to me real quick. There used to be the whole talk about desktop publishing, and there was I used to produce a podcast for a show called Life Tips, and his thing was working with life coaches to go ahead and get their books put out there, where they put tips together, and they were able to go and push a book out, desktop publishing, and get it published pretty easily, and get it to the right spot. So, in this book right now, talk to me about what is the onus that you have here for the ease of now being able to put a book out there, put it to market, the importance of getting it into Kindle form, getting an Audible book made out of it, getting someone to narrate it for you if it's you or someone else. Talk to me about that part.
Well, the book From Nobody to Best-Selling Author is all about how to write, publish, and market a book. Again, similar to Podcastnomics, that's all about podcasting. This is all about the book publishing industry, how to write your own book, publish it, market it, get it out there, sell it. So it's my latest book. It's been out for a few years now. And by the way, for all your listeners, I'd be glad to send them free copies of my books. They can just email me or reach out to me through my website, nareshvissa.com, or they can email me through the website, contact me, just say which book you want. I'd be glad to send it over. In the case of book publishing, the industry has changed tremendously from 30 years ago to today, because now anyone can become a book publisher. Amazon has completely changed the game. And so, like you said, when it comes to entrepreneurship, business owners, even just like private practice, doctors, CPAs, lawyers, it makes sense to actually write a book because not the economics of the book publishing industry is terrible. You're not going to become wealthy selling books. That's just a fact of the matter. But the book lays out all your ideas in a concrete manner to where you can reference them in the future. And more importantly, you share that information with the public, and now they develop respect and you develop credibility in their eyes so that they can eventually become clients. So that's the benefit of writing a book. And there are no rules. Of course, there are basic rules you have to follow, but you could write a 50-page book and publish it in paperback format, in Kindle, Amazon format. You can absolutely do that and sell a lot of copies. I read a book that was only 20 pages long, and it was a 3 years in a row #1 best-selling book on Amazon.
Fantastic. So let's go ahead and wrap things up real quick. I'm here with Naresh Vissa and one of the co-hosts of the Work From Home podcast with Adam Schroeder, and also the founder and CEO of Krish Media Marketing, author of Podcastonomics, the book of podcasting to make you millions. And I guess we also mentioned the book From Nobody to Best-Selling Author, How to Write, Publish, and Market Your Book. So 2 websites I'll make mention of, nareshvissa.com, NARESHVISSA, and workfromhomeshow.com, one word. Naresh, thanks for being on the program. I really appreciate you taking time out and give me a few tips that I need for myself. Even old dog like King of Podcasts, I could always use more because you've gotten there and you've made some good traction. So I appreciate you to let me know about this.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure being on the show. I love the conversation.
Let's go ahead and definitely do this again. And, listeners, I hope you go ahead and enjoy what we've got a chance to talk about, and we'll do more of these episodes. So, again, Podcast is Real, wherever you find podcasts. I hope you'll go ahead and catch me on the next episode. And all my work, kingofpodcasts.com, kingofpodcasts with an S.com. And we'll talk to you next time.